Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today at Unveiled. I'm Shahana Mukherjee, the president of Unveiled. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to enabling equitable access through bold conversations, tangible action, and a community committed to transforming systems. By reimagining access, opportunity, and sponsorship, we are building a world where access to opportunities isn't reserved for a lucky few. Our fireside chats are safe, bold spaces where we have real conversations with change makers who are challenging the status quo, leading with purpose, and showing what's possible. As you listen today, we invite you to join the movement. Engage with us through comments here on our LinkedIn posts and our monthly newsletter on our website,
It's I'm on your
unveiledbridgingthegap.org
phone.
slash blog. Become a member of our growing network at any one of our four membership tiers, or support our mission with a donation to ensure that we can continue offering programming and events like these that meet the needs of our community. Every voice matters, every action counts. Let's bridge the gap together. With that, I'll hand over to Jamie Sanderson Reed from our Communications and Outreach Advisory Council. Jamie, over to you.
Thanks, Sahana. I am absolutely thrilled to be here today with these phenomenal people, including all of you, to be able to talk about unlearning silence. My job today is really just to introduce our amazing speakers. I'll start with Lisa. Lisa Hornsheimer is the Vice President of Engineering for Oracle Cloud User Experiences. With over 20 years in software development and engineering, Lisa leads Oracle Cloud's online customer experiences and Oracle.com, bringing deep expertise in commerce systems and cloud revenue management. Her journey, which includes leadership roles at Microsoft, accelerating the Azure business, now has her embracing the unlearning and relearning of front-end engineering. Lisa is also a dedicated mentor within Oracle's Women's Leadership Community and on the 2025 Unwind with Unveiled Cohort Advisory Committee. Also, I'm really honored that Lisa is a fellow cohort with me from the 2024 program. So it's a pleasure to be here with Lisa today. I'd also like to introduce Elaine. Elaine Lynn Herring is a facilitator, speaker, and writer. She works with organizations and individuals to build skills in communication, collaboration, and conflict management. In her career, Elaine has worked on 6 continents and with a wide range of corporate, government, and nonprofit clients. She has trained mental health professionals, political officials, religious communities, and leaders at companies including American Express, Capital One, Google, Nike, Novartis, Shell, Pixar, and the Red Cross. Elaine is a former managing partner of Triad Consulting Group and a lecturer at Harvard Law School, specializing in dispute resolution, mediation, and negotiation. And she's the author of this amazing book. We're talking about unlearning silence. And one of the things that we acknowledge is that we all communicate in different ways. We have different preferences. We're going to have time built in at the end for question and answer if you want to come off of your microphone and ask a question directly. But also we have the chat and feel empowered to use it throughout, and we'll be monitoring the chat as well. So with that, I will hand it over to Lisa and Elaine.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jamie. That's awesome. Elaine, I'm so excited to be here with you. When Unveiled gave me the opportunity to interview you today, which was months ago, I was like, I get to meet the person behind this. This is amazing. I relished your book, right? But I want to kick it off with a prompt, Elaine, and then turn it over to you. Unlearning silence for me, when I read it multiple times, it's both a mirror and a toolkit. It's supposed to help individuals and organizations go beyond the superficial encouragement to truly relearn how to speak, listen, and act in ways that can unlock innovation, equity, and genuine collaboration. It was an amazing, amazing topic that I don't think I've spent much time really trying to understand or think about, and you've really brought it on to the dinner table for us to kind of sift through. Can you tell us Unlearning silence. What is silence?
I feel like, Lisa, I need to just take you with me. So thank you for being the ultimate PR hype woman, and delighted to be having dinner with you or having lunch in whatever time zone folks are in. Thank you for joining us all today. I want to back up a little bit to how I got to silence, because I, and maybe like many of you, and if this is true, let us know in chat, went through my career receiving the advice of you need to speak up more. If you're not getting heard, you're not getting promoted, you need to be more visible, you need to be more assertive, you need to smile more, something, essentially fix yourself. You need more confidence, you need more courage, and then maybe we can talk. Then maybe we'll respect you. And that seemed fundamentally flawed because I tried all of it, right? I tried to speak up more, better, louder, clearer, and yet the goalpost or the criteria kept changing. And so I had this moment of, wait, what if we've all got it wrong? What if it's not about speaking up more, but really what's getting in the way? And if we, as an industry of leadership development, have misdiagnosed it, maybe that's worth exploring. And to me, that was true. My own background is in teaching skills and concepts out of the Harvard Negotiation Project around negotiating, having difficult conversations, giving and receiving feedback. And yet some people still wouldn't do any of those things, which begs the question, what gives? And to me, what gives is silence, right? This misdiagnosis that has been called other things, imposter syndrome, lack of confidence, you need more courage, is actually silence at play. That's a long wind up to say, what is silence? To me, silence is when there's not enough room in the relationship or on the team or in the organization for your needs, goals, hopes, and concerns. When you weren't invited to the meeting and you didn't think you could ask. It's when you actually mustered up the courage to say something, and then someone, maybe skip level, maybe your direct manager, shot you a look. And, they didn't have to say anything, but that look conveys you're out of line. How could you say that? How could you show up, right? We all have these learned relationships with silence of whether my voice, what I have to offer is worthwhile, is worthy. And many of us, in order to keep the peace, not rock the boat, to be a good team player, stay silent because it seems like the easier, more strategic thing to do. So that's the silence I'm looking at unlearning, because once you start to look, silence is actually everywhere, right? It's what silence might I have learned? In what ways might the well-intentioned leaders around me actually be silencing me, even though they say all the right things? Like, I support you, I believe in you, Lisa. You're the best thing that ever happened to the team. But if you're not promoting me, you're not giving me the opportunities, you're not lending your social capital to amplify my voice, how much do you really value me? So that's the bucket of things that we're trying to tackle here.
You said something interesting just now. Each person has learned relationships with silence. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I'll start with my own story. Right? I'm the
Yeah.
youngest daughter of an immigrant family from Taiwan to the United States. As the youngest daughter, I was taught that I should be seen and not heard, right? Children should be seen and not heard. To respect my elders means to not ask questions, to defer to them. As an immigrant, you're just trying to stay, you're trying to survive. And so staying under the radar or blending in assimilation is a strategy, but silences your uniqueness and what you bring. So to me, learned silence is what messages did we pick up along the way from our family of origin to our education to life up till this point about when, where, how, and with whom it is safe or worthwhile to not just say something, but also share our insights, expertise, everything that we bring. And where we get it wrong is that it's a learned relationship with silence. Number one, we're not talking about silence. So it's misdiagnosed as courage or confidence and the lack thereof. Second, silence is learned because none of us as babies came out of the womb silent. We communicated the one way that we knew how, which was to cry all the time. And the research also shows that if babies aren't picked up and there's no response as a result of those cries, they learn over time that it's futile and they stop crying. In what ways might we have learned that in our own careers, including that as an entry-level person or earlier in your career, you're rewarded for staying silent, right? You're on the right team. You don't rock the boat. You're easy to work with because you have no needs, goals, hopes, demands of your own. You're just there to serve. Except then you're also told you don't have leadership potential and you don't have executive presence and you don't contribute and you're not a value add, right? That's the trap that we fall into. But the first thing to realize is that it's a learned relationship. And if it's a learned relationship, it is also something we can unlearn.
I underscored a piece of the book, and you're actually you hit on it, and I'm going to quote you, if I may, in the book.
I love it.
I'm a mother of 4, so I'm thinking kids and everything on top of day job duties,
Yeah.
right? And you brought up the notion of how we're brought into this world is not very silent. That in this quote, kids ask roughly 125 questions per day. By the time we're adults, we're asking about 6 questions per day. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, we learn silence. That's through research and your study and the epiphany that you have and bringing this content together so we could at least first start talking about silence, which is almost essentially the first step. What has research shown in you studying this so vigorously? Are cultures better at it than others, different areas? Genders, is there something there, or are we all created equal on our eventual relationship with silence?
Yeah, I'm smiling only because it has been such a learning curve for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I, of course, am approaching this topic with my lived experience, the identities that I hold. And I thought, is it just Asian people? Is it just Asian Americans? And then my Latina sisters introduced me to the phrase, calladita te ves más bonita, which translates into you are prettier when you shut up. And that was something repeated at Abuela's dinner table over and over as a child. And that is built into the culture. And when the Dutch publisher bought the translation rights for the Dutch version of the book, I mean, we often think of the Dutch as very direct. And their pitch to me was, look, we seem direct on the outside, but really there's a whole lot of silence there. And so that to me was this is more universal than I thought. And certainly part of my learning curve. What I will say is that we are not all equally subject to silence or likely to learn silence. Typically, the more subordinated identities you carry, meaning you're not part of the dominant group. So if it's a male dominant environment and you are a woman, then you are more likely to be othered, more likely to be questioned, less likely to be included. And as a result, also more inclined to be silent or silenced, because the penalties of using your voice, not just the words that you say or don't say in a meeting, but also, are you showing up? How are you moving through the world? If you're not conforming, you're more likely to be othered. So there is inherently an uphill battle anytime you carry a subordinated identity, right? Take class, education, ability, whatever it is. And the more, if we look at intersectionality and the more subordinated entities you carry, the more likely you are to be silenced because you're pushing on those levels. And your voice, your way of moving through the world is not normed. So I often get the question, is silence a women's problem? And I would say, no, silence is a leadership problem. Because it is not just the silence any one individual or any population with a certain identity has learned. It is also, how do we interact with each other? Because the ways we interact with each other either can support someone's voice, their potential, their ability to contribute, or it can silence them. I mean, so many of us are so sick of talking about return to office. It's like, that was so 4 years ago. Why is it such a hot button topic? Because that policy either supports or silences you, makes it easier or harder for you to show up and do your best work, show up and contribute. Right? And you can look at any number of policies and ask the question, who does this support? The people who have easy commutes, who are used to leading in person. Who does it silence? The people who have caregiving responsibilities, longer commutes, face greater microaggressions or aggressions at work. No policy or practice is net neutral. And so often workplaces assume a certain norm that you're supposed to talk in 3 succinct bullet points, no ums, just the right amount of emotion to show that you care, but not too much, particularly if you present as female, right? That's a very narrow way of expressing voice. What about the post processors? What about the deep thinkers who think better asynchronously? What about the people who communicate more effectively by typing? Do we not also want their best thoughts and insights? This goes back to Kahneman's work on fast and slow thinking. I'd argue we need it all. And the choices that we make day in and day out either make it harder or easier for people to contribute. And where we get it wrong is we forget that there are choices. We forget that why is there a 9 a.m. stand-up? Oh, because it's always been that way. Well, no one actually knows the purpose of this meeting. No one actually wants to be present at 9 a.m. And that meme, this meeting could have been an email, exists for a reason, right? Why don't we experiment with changing it to actually channel our energy and insights and expertise in more productive ways? We forget that we have a choice and that we could design differently.
You used another powerful word that was laced through the learnings that you were pushing and pressing in your book, and that's neutral. And silence is not neutral. It actually has power. And in your book, you articulated it so well, where silence is actually powerful in supporting groupthink. So whatever the topic that is getting the conversation in the room, if you're silent, you're actually supporting the group think. And I'm curious, tell us how we do this. We need to unlearn silence. We're going to follow you. If we want to follow you, how do we do it? Is it the leader's job to say, hey, silent people, come into this conversation? Or is it the silent people saying, man, or woman, or y'all, I need to step into this conversation, even though I'm being silent? Whose job is it?
Both. I say that with weight because I don't want it to be, right? As a human being, I don't want it to be my responsibility. I want to point to someone else and say, it's you. Now, I would say both, and a disproportionate responsibility for leaders. I say this as an invitation because no matter what, as a leader, you have a disproportionate impact on culture. And people are looking for, how do things actually work around here? Not what you say, but what you do, right? Not what you say, but what you reward. So if you say you care about different perspectives, but you unintentionally penalize someone for asking a question, offering a difference of perspective because it slows things down, then you're actually creating a different culture than the one you're saying you want. And so the book is really intended for well-intentioned leaders who want to cultivate space. Leaders, are you aware of the ways that you might be silencing people? That's chapter 5. I outline 9 different ways. It doesn't have to be intentional to have that impact. One that we sort of dance around is, if we're not intentionally designing the way that we work, we end up defaulting to the communication patterns and preferences of the people with the most power, organizational or institutional. Usually that's the leader, right? If I am a leader and I work best by talking things out in real time, I'm like, hey, Lisa, let's jump on a call. But Lisa is someone who is a post processor and thinks better by the technical term cache and compile, right? As you would with information. Putting them on the spot in the moment on a phone call isn't actually the best way to be the most productive, but it is a blind spot for me because we as human beings, unless we're intentional, assume that everyone is like us. And so asking that question, how can we create the space to invite in those different voices? That's just step 1, because we all come with different baggage, right? And different histories of, oh yeah, I had a leader in the past who said they cared, but clearly leaders don't care. If that's in my data set from the past, it's going to take me some time to really trust that. One place that I would encourage folks to go is actually process, and this is this design aspect. In the book, I talk about 3 different levers for voice: substance, relationship, and process. Process being the least sexy. But if on our agenda item, we're always asking the question, what about this works? What about this doesn't work? What are the pros? What are the cons? You inherently draw out the cons. You inherently draw out what doesn't work. And it's not because you ask someone to play devil's advocate or to push back, which can create relational friction. We're just answering the same old agenda items over and over. Now, that's the first piece with a big asterisk of yes, both, with an emphasis on leaders. And I say that because well-intentioned leaders often say, speak up. But if the leader's reaction doesn't welcome it, doesn't reward it, you're stuck in this cycle of silence. And there's a good hard look for me to look at, what agency do I have? Right? What agency do I have? What role, what assumptions do I carry about whether my voice matters? About whether this workplace is like the last workplace I was in, about whether this leader is like the last leader or the last couple leaders I had, and to really interrogate that and to experiment with different things that bring us more in alignment with the people that we want to be. So that's a long way of saying both. We've all got work to do. It's not just based on intention. It's what is the actual impact I'm having on the people around me, and what life do the choices I'm currently making allow me to live?
What you're saying is we all have a responsibility as leaders, as people participating in the conversation. And one of the reflections I had on your book is unlearning silence is both a mirror and a toolkit. So the mirror is, I mean, there's a huge onus on us to be self-aware. Who are we? What are we doing? What's our intentions? How are we adapting? How are we coming into a different perspective or in a different environment and being confident in that? And that's the mirror. I want to talk a little bit about chapter 4 in the toolkit. These are the tools that you talk about. The question why seems like a really powerful question. Could you help to share with us thinking on that? It's a toolkit. Let's armor folks in this conversation today with a little bit of tools that they can put in their toolkit and start practicing, right?
Yeah, I love that. Is there anything particular about why?
Why sometimes, so from an organizational behavior, learnings, right? Again, societal norms shape kind of how we think, and we start to learn a new relationship with silence. I've been in circles of thought from a lot of reputable and successful people that why can be an attack. But maybe that's trying to keep us silent now that I think about it.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think there's work on both sides. I'm also laughing because I am reading Cat Kid Comic Club, a graphic novel with my kid right now. And the annoying thing that little Petey, the cat, does to ask Papa Petey is why? And I think it's actually a useful illustration of our own tolerance for it, and also the societal norms of how many questions we're allowed to ask versus the stat that you quoted earlier, right? Of kids at averaging 125, and then how do we learn it? I think we learn it because our parents get annoyed at us. I just want to be clear that as a parent, I'm not advising free reign on the why questions. And for us as leaders to really ask, why does the why question land as it does? Why is it considered a threat? Why is it, of course, now I'm asking why about the why question, which maybe is annoying.
I want to add some vulnerability here as a leader myself. I catch myself at times when someone asks me why, I think, oh, why are they asking me why? And I know my reaction could shut them down. And actually asking why should be more welcomed, right?
Yes.
And I have to get practice as a leader in not shutting that down as much as we need to get into conversations and feel safe and secure to ask why questions.
Yes. And let's also translate the message, right? If someone on my team is asking me why this timeline, why that outcome, it means that I have not sufficiently communicated my reasoning for that timeline or outcome. That's just a statement of fact that if we take the ladder of inference and rapid decision-making studies, Sean's work of we have different ways of metabolizing this information. And I, as a leader, probably have different data, different risk assessments. It's so intuitive to me that I have not sufficiently communicated it. There's that very logical thing that's not the feeling in the moment, though, right? The feeling in the moment is, ugh, like, why do I have to explain this again? Maybe I have explained it. Maybe I think I've explained it. And that actually takes me to the example of Toiletgate in the book of we don't all have the same operating assumptions. And it can feel really demeaning to have to spell it out for someone, maybe demeaning to them and demeaning to us. But the reality is we can't read each other's minds. So if we can do some of those reframes of when you ask why, it's because you don't yet get it, or I have not sufficiently communicated it, it takes some of the sting out of it. Now, as a leader, I also want to have compassion and empathy for where we are as leaders, which is you're not just getting the why from one person, it's coming maybe from all sides and across the matrices, right? And so there's an exhaustion there, which again takes me back to process of where and when and how might we have those conversations, which in the moment as a leader could be, I really want to answer that question. I'm so glad you asked it. We're jumping into another call in 10 minutes. Let me circle back at the end of the day. Or we're going to put that on the agenda item for the team stand up on Friday, right? Just because someone asks it in the moment doesn't mean you have to answer it in the moment, but you do need to acknowledge and sort of catch the ball that they are giving you and reaffirm the behavior. And then your action has to back up what you've said. If you're actually going to address it at the stand up on Friday, then you actually have to do it rather than just punt it and it goes into the void. So I so appreciate your vulnerability, and I think there's work for us to do in how we receive the message. And then there's also the bigger, I think, more strategic design work of where are we going to put those questions, because there are going to be better and worse times for us to receive them and answer them.
Again, I'm playing on a word that you said, and it was in my notes, exhaustion. So this is exhausting.
Yes.
Emotional energy over physical energy, I would argue it takes more out of me than it does when I'm trying to exercise. And now we're tasked with the change makers out there, the pioneers that really want to rewrite a new script for the future generations, where how we can change a little bit of society norms and culture. It requires an additional level of energy on top of what we're doing already in the office that's being asked of us. How do we, this is a tiring exercise.
Yeah. This is a tiring exercise because it is so much easier to go along with the flow, to reinforce the status quo. We also know, if we study history and research, that it leads to not good places, right? You cited groupthink. It is at the core of every corporate scandal of the 21st century. It leads to Boeing being where it is right now. All of that, we know that that is true. So it begs the meta question for each of us. If we are not okay with where things are now, what choices are we going to make to lead to a different outcome? And as we analyze this, it can feel like a lot of work. I would argue, though, it always begs the question to me of who does your silence serve? And if your silence does not serve yourself, because you're not getting heard, you're not getting your needs met, that is contributing to your exhaustion.
That's so true.
I would try something else.
That's a good shift, right? Yes. We're all probably trying to figure out, like, how do we break into this, and how do we tap into some energy reserves to take this on? But really, it's a shift of thinking, to your point right now. There are times maybe when silence is serving me more than not. Totally. But there are absolutely times where, honestly, I'm being short-sighted to think my silence right now is serving me.
Yes, because you may not be saying something to that colleague, but energetically, if you're staying up at night, spinning about it, beating yourself up for not saying, you're still spending that energy. And the the kicker is that other person may not know, right? They may not know that they were offensive. They may not know that it didn't land right. They may not know that you disagree, and you're spending energy holding all of that. Your body is having to deal with that. And so many of us, particularly women at work, the body keeps the score, right? And so then it manifests later in breakdowns, in burnout, in hives, in loss of hair. I mean, whatever it in cancer. Meanwhile, silence is also, and I say that as a Juris Doctorate, not as a medical doctor, so take it for what it is, but we know that social isolation contributes to all of these really physical health conditions.
Yes, it does.
Right? And so even if I'm not saying it or sharing it with someone else, I'm still carrying it. And so my challenge to us would be to reimagine a different way, because I would argue that this way is not serving us. I go into this in much more nuance in chapter 3 of when silence makes sense, because I also want to be clear that unlearning silence does not mean saying everything everywhere all the time to everyone. The world's too noisy and complex for that. But the difference between silence that is additive and strategic, and frankly, silence that is damaging or oppressive, is agency. Are you choosing it, or does it feel like the only option it is chosen for you? And absolutely to your analysis of, am I being short-sighted? Right, I break this down in chapter 3, but am I being short-sighted because I'm focused on what are the benefits of staying silent? I don't have to deal with your strong reaction right now. I don't have to deal with the issue right now. What are the benefits of speaking? Right, we focus on the benefits of staying silent rather than the potential benefits of speaking up, meaning things actually could change. And we focus on the costs of speaking up rather than the costs of staying silent, because they're on different timescales. Short-term, long-term, what is guaranteed, what is not guaranteed, what is stomached by me versus what might benefit the group. Again, at the end, whether you share of yourself, I go back to agency. I can't tell you that you should do this or shouldn't do it. And I don't know the life you're living and what you're carrying. Those are all choices for you to make. Let's not forget that there is a choice. That just because the habits are to stay silent and stew about it at night or talk about it with friends and family, let's not trick ourselves into thinking that that's the only option just because it's the one that's most familiar to us.
So
that seemed to weigh heavily on you.
No, that it's just, there's a lot here to unpack. Elaine, so I'm at a fairly high level in an organizational structure that I get the unfortunate benefit of, when I say something, there's a certain respect maybe that comes with it. So maybe in some of these contexts, it's easier for me to speak up, right? But when I put myself back in my early years of my career, where I didn't have maybe a title next to my name that afforded me the abilities to speak up, I really battled with, I don't want to be a problem child. And how, like, if I'm trying to think about our audience right now and how we can, some points and some messaging through your research and your focus here, what could early in career folks, or folks that don't have maybe necessarily the right level of organizational leadership associated with their job, what should we be saying to them?
Yeah. I'll get there. And I also want to note, this is why it was the call to action, disproportionate responsibility for leaders. Because if you worked for a leader or with a leader who said, whatever your title, you have a valuable perspective, how different an interaction. So that's a call to action for leaders amongst us. And if you do not yet have a title or work in an environment that gives you that respect that you deserve as a thinking, feeling human being, and that dignity by nature of you being a human, then my favorite phrase is, from where I sit. From where I sit, that doesn't make sense. From where I sit, I don't see how the numbers add up. From where I sit allows you to own the legitimacy and the limitation of your perspective. A lot of times we don't speak up because we anticipate the pushback, or we think, well, I don't know everything, right? I'm not at headquarters or whatever it is. I'm not deep in engineering, but from where you still have a point of view from that narrow place of where you sit. From where I sit also begs the question, after you've stated your perspective, what does it look like from where you sit? And that gets us into conversation rather than conflict. So if you're looking for a back pocket phrase to couch what you're saying in, I would go to from where I sit. Or you can leverage your perspective, right? From a finance perspective, or someone closest to the data, or someone who's been deep in the weeds. Own that perspective, because no one knows everything. And leaders cannot make good decisions, sound decisions, based on incomplete data. And you have data. So your responsibility is not to make the decision or necessarily influence the decision. Your responsibility, whatever your role, is to provide accurate data. And sometimes that reframe helps us with the hierarchical differences, while I'm going to tap on leaders again to say, how are you approaching the people on your team? Because that second stance of, look, I don't know everything. I need you to tell me what it looks like from where you sit. And I can't make good decisions without you is very different than you're a junior analyst. Why do we pay you for what you do?
It really, so the takeaway there, if I'm hearing you, and some of your analysis of the chapters in the book, there's a more amplified opportunity to change the course here from a top-down standpoint
Mm-hmm.
than there really is from a grassroots. I'm not saying, like you did say, it's a dual responsibility.
Yeah.
But then that goes into, folks on the phone here and us reading the book, and people at home that'll watch the recording later. It really goes into understanding the culture that you're a part of.
Yes. Including, is that culture worthy of your voice?
Yes.
And I say that with a little bit of my heart breaking, because I want to believe that we can change the systems from the inside, and your inability to singularly change a system and a culture is not personal failure. It does beg the question, is this where you want to spend your time, energy, your gifts, your talents? Is this system, team, organization where you want to use your voice? Because those around you may be more or less receptive to it. And those are choices that I would put back on any one person to make sure that you're getting enough out of the system to make it worth your time and energy, because those choices over time compound to become your life. So if you have one life to live, how do you want to live it?
Harvard wrote, and you're touching on it, and Harvard wrote a business case on microaggressions. So what you're explaining is in the system, where if in isolation, each one of those things, we're just like, it's not bad, we're carrying it, I got this. But really, if you reframe that, zoom out, those microaggressions are the items that actually are our own demise. And you're really calling attention to the system in those micro bites, where we have to make sure we're keeping perspective on the whole.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Jamie, how are we doing on time?
We're close to time, but I think it'd be great to hear from the audience, questions, thoughts.
Thanks, Elaine. It's been awesome talking to you and learning from you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Elaine, and thank you, Lisa, for this amazing conversation. Really, so many insights and such a powerful dialogue. And thank you, everyone, for joining, participating in this conversation. As we have shared before, you are going to be entered in a giveaway for this amazing Unveiled tote. So we will announce the winner soon. We have an exciting lineup of events planned through October already. So check out our upcoming events, unveiledbridgingthegap.org/events. And our next event is on July 10th, how to use AI to empower, not replace talent. It is with the CEO of Upwage. She's doing some amazing work. It is free for our members, $15 for our non-members. And if you are in the nonprofit space, send us an email, DM us on LinkedIn for your discount code that will give you $5 off on that $15. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate all your engagement and participation. And Elaine and Lisa, thank you so much for taking the time and navigating this conversation with us today. We learned so much from you.